Great, thanks, Eddie. So the next session, we're going to talk a little bit more, go into depth about the National Society's role in emergency alerting, and we've got two very exciting presentations lined up for presenters. So the first will be from Marcus Bird from the New Zealand Red Cross. And Marcus has been very instrumental within the New Zealand Red Cross in terms of promoting CAP, partnering with government to ensure government's using CAP, and working out all distribution mechanisms as well. So very excited to hear about what Marcus is going to present. And then we've got a colleague from the Uganda Red Cross, Emmanuel Ntale, who is going to talk a little bit about their experience in terms of anticipatory action and what they're doing around anticipatory action and early warning, and give us a chance to think about how CAP could potentially enhance that or connect to what they are doing. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Marcus for his presentation. Marcus, are you there? There we go.
Yeah, great. Hi, Nathan, thank you for that. I'm just going to share my screen.
Let's provide the rights that Zoom has given us. So let me, good, awesome.
How does that look?
It looks like we are seeing also the other slides.
How's that?
Good. Now we are only seeing the main slide. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Thank you. So this is really a case study of the Hazard app and the CAP experiences of New Zealand Red Cross. So we started in 2015, and we started working, or looking at other societies' versions of the Hazard app to see if it was appropriate to New Zealand. You know, the Hazard app was appealing for us. It was a means to provide alerts to the public. Cost effective, so no cost to the public. There was self-managed. It doesn't require any, you know, real management or contracts. We didn't have to do any development. It had an international reputation for reliability, and it had proven its robustness during Hurricane Sandy in the US. And we're also working to comply with international standards for alerting. Now, but the problem was, you know, really taking that information held by authorities, collating it, and delivering it to the hands of the communities so that they could better prepare and respond to emergencies. So the issue in New Zealand was that the information was held by multiple agencies. Each organisation had its own delivery mechanism. So this could be Facebook, it could be Twitter, it could be emails, it could be texts, or it could be radio. But there was no consistency. And often the messages at civil defence level required information to be compiled from multiple sources in an ever-evolving situation. So between different regions, alerting was very inconsistent. We also found that many civil defence groups struggled with the amount of work required to communicate with each alert, and a different approach based on their individual capacity. So for example, in some of our larger centres, they have a really large team. In some of our smaller centres, the emergency management office may be only 1 or 2 people. And really for us, without consistent, reliable source of New Zealand data, the resulting poor user experience meant the Hazard app project had little chance of success as the state of play was in New Zealand at the time. So we began a series of steps, and what I've tried to do is sort of just group these into 3 steps, really just as a pathway, you know, for anyone else who might undertake a similar approach. So, you know, step 1 was stakeholder mapping, to identify the internal and external stakeholders and undergo an assessment of those stakeholders. We also created a value proposition. So we tried to understand what our stakeholders' objectives were, and we tried to identify the value of the product and how it would, and what value that would have for each stakeholder. And then we created an engagement strategy, you know, based on participation, governance of the app, a means to endorse the app, and a means to promote the app. So really, when we went through our stakeholders, we were able to group our stakeholders into 2 key groups. Our principal stakeholders, so these groups were the main contributors to the app. They were made up of authorised alerting agencies who hold influence positions regarding future developments, such as CAP and other steering groups. We had secondary stakeholders, so these were other interest groups throughout New Zealand who engaged with the app, but were not primary contributors and did not hold high levels of influence. So we started to map out those stakeholders, and we ended up with a table a little bit like this. And so, you know, trying to understand you know, each of those key or primary stakeholders, you know, what their contribution would be, you know, how involved they would be in the project, how much influence that they would have with the project, you know, how important was it to have them be part of the project. So you can see we really, you know, tried to work out and analyze each of those stakeholders and see where they would fit. We did this also internally as well, because within our own organisation, there were certain stakeholders who were, you know, either key to success of the project through contribution, or they may, you know, have been a barrier, and we needed to work out how, you know, we could engage them to help them, you know, produce a successful outcome. So we ended up with a wide number of government agencies, central and regional civil defence groups, also research agencies, New Zealand Met Service, GNS Science that provide notifications on earthquakes. They monitor volcanic activity as well. And we also engaged with the Joint Centre for Disaster Research at Massey University, and that turned out to be a really valuable relationship. And Bonnie mentioned before, you know, quite often government agencies have a different view of the information that communities need to know. And the Joint Centre for Disaster Research really represented our users and backed up the user story through evidence. So our value proposition, you know, we wanted to find out what our partners needed, and that was to deliver consistent national messaging. That meant consultation, lots of consultation. And the things that we found out were really important. They wanted an information hub of official alerts, where they only needed to add additional information around some local actions. They wanted a common standard where data is structured so it can be shared across multiple platforms. The ability to include geo-targeted messages or display the affected areas, the impacted areas. And they wanted a library of pre-populated messages, in particular short messages. And really important, they wanted national consistency. The user experience must be the same wherever they are. And, you know, as we know, hazards move across territory boundaries. So, you know, to engage such a large group of multiple agencies, we needed a strategy. We decided the only way for us to be successful was if our partners could use our platform to generate alerts. And really this was to provide, you know, some form of consistency. It allowed us to, you know, engage them and help develop protocols for alerting. So essentially we offered our platform for free to create the alerts and send the alerts out. And with the help of the GDPC, we set them up with their own logins. And we formed a working group, the Hazard App working group. And really we empowered this group. Really they became the governance group of the Hazard App, and all decisions, you know, ongoing were made by this group. The group felt that they owned the Hazard App, that it was their product, and they would promote it and advocate for it. And I guess really where Red Cross had an advantage was we were a facilitator. We you know, the only interest we had was ensuring that the public had these messages as fast and as well constructed as possible. So we were able to bring a whole range of agencies together as a collective to work on a common goal. And really, you know, to do this, CAP became essential to our success. You know, as we started to ingest feeds from other agencies, they weren't in a CAP format, and we really were being plagued by issues relating to the data. And this impacted on the user experience. Often there was no polygon data, and crude tables were used to divide up the country by region. So, you know, really the CAP standard of alerting was so essential to our success. So what we did was we co-hosted a CAP jumpstart meeting in New Zealand with the New Zealand Met Service, and invited all of those stakeholders along. And you know, we learned about CAP, the importance of CAP, and really the outcome of CAP Jumpstart was the formation of the CAP working group, who were tasked to develop a national technical standard, and that was hosted by the National Emergency Management Authority. And really, you know, what we did is we took the international standard and looked at the elements and how we would use them in a New Zealand context. And then that's an ongoing thing. One of the things we're looking at quite closely now is how we utilize attributes such as colour and how they are communicated in CAP. And quite recently, the New Zealand Met Service has introduced yellow for weather watches, orange for weather warnings, and red for the most severe type of weather event. And really, based on the elements in CAP, that really drives the colour coding. And in the CAP feed, we're able to carry those colour specifications too that we can apply to the polygon. So moving to CAP was a real game changer for us. Suddenly we started to get new feeds. GeoNet updated their feed. They were the first to produce a CAP feed. And then the Met service provided us a feed. And as a result, we saw our user experience really improve, and the feedback on the App Store really improve as you know, the polygon data meant that people could see where the hazard was impacting, where previous data didn't contain that information. So then the New Zealand government started to work on emergency mobile alerts, and a lot of the people who were in our hazard app working group were seconded to create the process to launch some emergency mobile alerts in New Zealand. And an outcome of that working group produced an EMA, an emergency mobile alert CAP feed, which we were able to ingest this year into the hazard app. So one of the things we've done particularly well is really, you know, whenever a new product came along, a new Red Cross product came along, we looked for that opportunity and we promoted that. And when the What Now messages came along, we were able to promote that to the CAP working group, and they set up a sub-working group to contextualize those messages for New Zealand. And now that's picked up and delivered in New Zealand by Google. So reaches a really wide audience. So we're always looking for continued improvement. You know, we've added the, you know, we continue to add extra content. We now have the ability to ingest new CAP feeds really quickly because they're in that common standard. The Met Service has released a new road snowfall CAP feed this year. And by disseminating EMA via the hazard app, we're able to deliver to communities beyond cellular, so people that have their own Wi-Fi at home. So really, that CAP feed has allowed us to really reach last mile delivery. So what makes it all work for us? For us, the establishment of working groups, having regular meetings, getting together in the same place. At the moment, it's mostly teleconference and video conference, and creating collaborative tools and a common purpose. We set up the hazard app working group, and from that, spin-off was the CAP working group. And what it's seen is it's seen Red Cross involved within the alerting community, where before we really weren't part of it, and now we're a key contributor. And really, you know, CAP's been the standard which we've been able to base our success on. So thank you. That's my presentation.
Thank you very much, Marcus. Yeah, I like the people who are already providing some reactions, and I think with this rich presentation, we are we should do a little bit of a stretch. I'm very sure people's heads were like this, like mine, as we paid attention to your presentation. Now, I would like to invite the participants, with or without the camera, to just do a very quick and sharp stretch. All right, let's take the, the head to the left. Was that my left? To the right. Thank you. To the left. Thank you. I actually see Justin is taking it to another level. All right, I'll just follow you, Justin. All right, a little stretch and a little stretch to the back and to the front. Okay, good job. Thank you very much. Now I'd like to hand over to Nathan to say, to wrap it up, and before we invite Emmanuel. Thank you.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Eddie. And thanks, Marcus. Really interesting presentation. So I think kind of just maybe to highlight a couple of key things, what I find really interesting is the role that the National Society has played all throughout the process. So you advocated with government, you provided the key messages in coordination with government, but then you were also distributing. So you've got an application that you were managing to help distribute, and you did a partnership with Google to help distribute. So playing a real important role all through the entire process. Maybe Marcus, you could just comment a little bit more. We're going to talk to, Google's going to present a bit later, but on the media side of things, maybe just a quick, you had the application, Google or other media agencies picking up the CAP alerts and disseminating them.
Yeah. So I mentioned before, every time a new Red Cross tool came out, we looked at the opportunity and the value that it could provide our stakeholders. And one of those tools was the global, the API hub. And so by having the civil defence groups use our platform to create their CAP alert, it went to the Hazard app, but also went into the hub. And they were able to then pull that out of the hub and update their website, their Facebook, and their Twitter. So in the past, it used to take them several hours to complete all of those, and mostly just during work, work hours. But effectively, they were able to sit at home, open up a browser, log into our platform, and update all of their platforms simultaneously. So they couldn't do that without CAP, and once that message was available in that standard format, it was able to be deployed everywhere.
Excellent. Thank you. Very, very inspiring. Any questions? Marcus is calling from New Zealand, everybody, so he's on a bit late, and we appreciate him coming and staying with us. So before we let him go, maybe we just jump to one or two questions that the audience may have for Marcus. If you have a question, feel free to raise your hand or just speak up or type it in the chat. Any questions for Marcus? Okay, I think it was all crystal clear, so that's a good sign. Oh, wait a minute. So question from Nazreen. So Marcus, you mentioned working groups, and any tips for good partnership building, for how you went about developing those working groups? And was there a cost associated?
Yeah, I think the key thing for us was we utilized on the Red Cross products, so the Hazard app. So the cost of those was covered by the GDPC. So we had something of value. We were able to go to the working group, to the groups, and say, look, we can provide you with a mechanism to alert the public, and it won't cost you anything. So that was really good value for them, and that's what got them to the table. And the key thing was to make them the decision makers. and by having them, so we don't do anything without going out to the group and asking their opinion and asking them to make that decision. So it's done as a collective. How much did it cost? One of the things we said was, because the development was covered by the GDPC, we said we will provide the platform at our expense, but the groups, the civil defence groups, had to promote it in their communities. They had to use their own advertising budget to promote it as a backbone alerting tool. And they do that, they promote EMA and the Hazard app as their two backbone alerting tools. And for us to run the Hazard app, just some changes, because the Hazard app is something we've retained as it's been retired, and there's other projects now we're I guess this is why we're here today. We've got sponsorship from the commercial sector now. It will be launched next week, and we'll be receiving $50,000 a year to maintain the ongoing costs of the Hazard app, including staff, equipment, and support.
Excellent. No, thanks, Marcus. So just maybe for the group, let me paste in the chat a link to an alert hub, and this is a tool that governments can use. Marcus was referring to one that was part of this hazard application that the GDPC provided. This is one that our colleague Elliot Christian has developed, the alert hub, and it includes a CAP creator. The governments can actually go on, they can create their alerts, and they can publish their alerts automatically through this link. And the IFRC is also in the process of working on a similar alert hub and CAP creator that would be available. So I think somebody asked earlier, well, somebody just asked, but there was a question earlier about the cost of doing this and how difficult this is to do. And this service that's being provided, the filtered alert hub, makes that basically free. You can go on, you can use this freeware, well, governments can, and then they can issue their alerts at essentially no cost. So we'll have a session a little bit later in the day that will go more into details on alert hubs, but just to make you all aware that this is a free tool that's available, very similar to what Marcus was describing in terms of the CAP generation. Any other questions, or why don't we maybe, Eddie, can I hand it back to you to introduce Manny? Thank you, Marcus.
Thank you very much, Marcus. Thank you even for sacrificing your sleep, to present this quite very useful information. Right now, all the way from New Zealand, now, guys, you have an opportunity to fly without moving an inch to Uganda. We go to Uganda Red Cross, where we are going to meet with Emmanuel Ntale. Emmanuel Ntale is the early warning and early action officer. He's going to be sharing with us. And I think, yes, he's going to be sharing with us his experience on emergency alert, and as well as on forecast-based financing alerts. Over to you, Emmanuel. Thank you very much.
Okay, yes, good afternoon, good morning, and good night to everyone. I want to share my screen, if I have the right.
Yes, Emmanuel, I think it's coming, and now we see other slides.
Yes.
Now we see a single slide.
Okay, yes, again, my name is Ntale Emmanuel. I'm the early warning, early action officer for the Uganda Red Cross Society, and I'm going to share our experiences in early warning, early action emergency alerting and what we've gone through convening the different partners to harmonize the anticipatory action approach that we are developing here. So I might say this is not as much developed as Mark has presented. To give a snapshot of what's happening in Uganda, like we see from many of the countries, the disasters are really becoming extreme and the frequency is increasing everywhere, most of the districts here in the country, and we are majorly dealing with floods and drought. Those are the major disasters that we are always dealing with here in country. Those photos you see, they are happening right now in most of the districts in the country. We have in the West Nile, people are still now dealing with the floods. We have in the Kalamoja region, this was last year, drought, and so many across so many locations in the country. But in the urban areas, majorly, what we are mostly dealing with is really the flash floods. And we shall see what that means in terms of emergency alerting and also the coordination system here. So yes, that's that slide to give us a snapshot of what's happening across most parts of the country. So our role majorly in early warning and action broadly. Our role, Uganda Red Cross, we work with the National Emergency and Coordination Center. The disasters and emergency alerting in Uganda is coordinated majorly under the Office of the Prime Minister that established what we call the NECOC. The NECOC is the National Emergency Coordination and Operations Center. If we see from the graphics, I think that's the left, we see Uganda Red Cross bridges the gap from the national coordination and then the community because of the volunteer networks and the structures we have on the ground. Those volunteers are part of the sub-county disaster management committees, and also the branches at the district level are part of the district disaster management committees. So some of the alerts originate from the communities, from the volunteers and from the branch managers, where to the structure, to the National Emergency Coordination Center, that is now the mandated institution to relay them nationally through the different media platforms that we shall look at later in the slides. But also we are working with the government and other stakeholders to develop the forecast-based action approach. This is informed by the pilot that we conducted sometime back in 2015, and also the program that we are developing now since 2018. And through that initiative, we are working with the different partners and we are coordinating as well. That is through the technical working group that we established. But majorly, what we want to achieve from that working group, or what we have achieved so far, is to make sure that we have an harmonized approach in regards to the triggers, thresholds, and also how we coordinate emergencies and alerts and the different roles and responsibilities. And that working group we have has representation from the government, from the national MATE offices. We have representation from academic institutions, from Makerere University, which is the leading university here in Uganda, and also some UN agencies are part of that working group. And it's through that working group that we've established or developed what we call the early actions protocol for floods, which has finalized and also has clear structure on how the alerts flow from the system that we are using. We are using the GROFAS alert system. GROFAS is the Global Flood Awareness System. And we are now using the same approaches to develop the early actions protocol for drought. And also internally, the Uganda Red Cross has SOPs that are regulating the flow of the alerts. We have the emergency preparedness and response protocol that also supports in coordinating the flow of the alerts and coordinating emergencies broadly in the disaster management department. Yeah. So yes, like I mentioned, we majorly deal with two types of alerts. One is what we have developed from the forecast-based financing or the anticipatory action approach, which is originating from the brokers when it issues a forecast of certain thresholds that are already preset there. So what we see, I think this is the right in red, the SOPs regulating the flow of alerts from the FBF protocol or from the forecast-based financing approach. The alert originates from the international MIT or the broker system in this case. And then we get a copy of it, Uganda Red Cross, the Red Cross Climate Center that is up, and also the colleagues that we have worked with to develop this protocol. The guys from the Uganda National Met Authority and the Directorate of Water Resources Management that we majorly call the DWRM. After that, then from the line side here, even if we are able to see below here, this is the line, I can get a pen here. This is the line that forwards it now to the Office of the Prime Minister and then to the district disaster management committees and then to the communities. But from the Red Cross angle, the early warning focal point is the one who forwards that alert to the EPR manager. The EPR is the Emergency Preparedness and Response person, the director for the department, and then to the National Emergency Task Force. But at the line of the EPR manager, the alert goes to the branch manager, and then it goes to the community. This line that goes to the Emergency Task Force is the one that activates the partner national societies and other partners involved in that. On the side of the alerts for the normal emergency preparedness and response, which is known to the anticipatory action approach, the alerts can originate from the communities, from the affected communities, where the RCRC, the Red Cross Action Team members and the staff, to the relevant branch managers who check to confirm the alert, and then they forward it to the headquarters that will coordinate with the different stakeholders. So what we see, the side of the black is how the alert flows from the side of the emergency preparedness and response. If it's originating from the local, from the communities to the branch manager, they do the rapid assessments to ascertain the magnitude of the damage or the alert, if it's in anticipation, for example, that will act. Then it will go to the department heads, then to the emergency task force, or to the local government authorities. Like I mentioned, our branch structures are part of the sub-county disaster management committees and also the district disaster management committees. If it's originating from the national, this time is the national is from the National Met Authority or from the NECOC, the Emergency Coordination and Operations Center, which is the mandated institution to do or issue these different alerts. Then we are part of that committee, the National Disaster Management Committee. We get it from there and then we send it to the branch structures, the department, and then to the National Emergency Task Force. And that's according to the policy, and that's what we've been following. So that should take a maximum of an hour from the time the alert is issued, either from the community or from the national center to the intended or the end user for that specific alert. Here, yes. Now there have been critical lessons and experiences that we've learned following those two approaches. One, the approach of the anticipatory action and also the approach of the emergency responses. There are always really delays. Okay, the first experience or the first lesson is that flow is not linear in how as it is in the protocols, really. Most times or sometimes the alerts originate from the community or from the volunteer focal person or the community-based volunteer directly to either the department heads or to the Secretary General or to the OPM, to the network. The other times, if it's sometimes it originates from either the national to the National Emergency Coordination Center down to the communities. It's not as streamlined or as very straightforward as it is in the protocols. And the other critical lesson that we've learned throughout is working with these different stakeholders in the technical working groups and coordination platforms like the National Disaster Risk Management Platform. They play a critical role in sharing and harmonizing, in sharing these alerts and harmonization, because one of the reasons that inspired us to coordinate or initiate the specific technical working group specific alert for anticipatory action was there are different organizations in country and different stakeholders have different trigger systems, and they're taking action from different alerts, whether it's the same community that you're targeting or different community, there are different systems. And what we're advocating for and what we pushed for from the working group that we've at least achieved for the FBF, at least for the floods that we have finalized, is we have a common understanding of the alert that we are going to use and the source and how it flows. And that's what we are still pushing for the drought forecast-based financing system that we are developing. The other critical lesson is technology and digital tools is increasingly making emergency alert flow more effective, like through the WhatsApp platforms. We majorly use a lot of these different platforms like WhatsApp to coordinate most of these alerts on a timely basis to kind of reduce the lead time. And they have been quite effective because immediately if something originates from the community, we already have access to it at headquarters and all the responsible people from within the flow of the protocol. And we are saying that's the way to go. However, there are still also some bottleneck in using that technology. And if we are talking about reaching the last mile, I think it's very critical to think through the end user. In most cases, even from the National Emergency Coordination Center, some of these alerts are shared on TV, on Twitter, and so much on social media platforms, which the real vulnerable communities who are the target, who should be the target for these alerts, barely have even access to either network or even electricity. And that's becoming increasingly every now and then when you're on TV, on news, then they're talking about alerts that are targeting people in the communities who even barely have access to electricity. And yeah, that's becoming increasing here in Uganda. So yeah, I think that's all that I want to share, unless there are some questions or feedback from the community, from the rest of the participants. Over to Eddie. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Emmanuel. And I like the way you like communities. Over to the communities. Yes, we're a community of practitioners on early warning and early action, and we are interested to improve that and to make sure that the people who are in most need of this information get it. Now, any questions for Emmanuel? You already have some. One was, can we have the copy of the presentation after the workshop? I think that was answered. Then I see Rebecca was asking, what would you say is the top lesson learned from the early warning, early action work that you have talked about? So you mentioned some lessons learned. Is there one that you say that, well, this one stands out? Please let us know, Emmanuel. And then I see another question from Elliot saying, will you coordinate with the Uganda National Meteorology Authority? UNMA recently implemented a CAP. So it's there's some information for you that recently the Uganda National Meteorology Authority implemented CAP. So will you coordinate with them? Emmanuel, over to you.
Yes, Eddie, thank you very much.
Your video is off, yet we were enjoying the background.
Ah, okay. Yeah, so yes, Eddie, thank you very much. I will begin with the last question for coordination with the Uganda Met Authority. Yes, we are working with them in developing the FBF approach. They are part of the working group, but now specifically for the CAP, I think they had not yet said it out that they have implemented the CAP. And I think this is a point for follow-up with them to see what lessons we can learn from them in regards to the CAP. And the other, yes, Eddie?
Please go on.
Yeah, the other question is about what top lesson do we learn from the anticipatory action? I think it's very critical. What we pick is coordination with the different stakeholders is very critical, and it's very important because the impacts of these disasters are so many across, and no one institution is having the capacity to address them all. So it takes a lot of time, but it's a journey you cannot avoid. You have to have them part of the working groups, agree on these different alerts and the coordination mechanism and the roles and responsibilities. And I think that's something you cannot underscore throughout early warning, early action approach. Yeah. Is there any question I've missed? I think I only captured 2 questions.